What's up, Digilogue fam? It's your boy Drew. It's episode 19, the L's, aka Lessons Learned. Oh man, I can't believe it. 19 episodes. We started here in January. We're approaching the end of the year, and we can't thank you enough. I think more importantly, we just want to wish you and your families just good energy and good spirits. Everyone within your community is staying safe and creative at home, and we appreciate all the support. Without further ado, I want to introduce a good buddy of mine, someone I had a pleasure to work with, but also, we do a lot of things together. So my boy, David Melhado, did I pronounce that right? Melhado?
Melhado. Melhado.
Mahado. See,
Yeah, it's all
yeah.
good.
So Mahado, I always want to just, especially when it comes to introductions, you always want to make sure you got it right. But David, what's up, man? Before we go into it, like, how are you? How's the fam and how's everyone doing, health wise?
Yeah, thanks, man. First, thank you for having me join. I've been staying up to date on all your episodes over the last year, so it's really dope what you've been doing.
Appreciate it.
But overall, family's good. I actually came down to Florida at the beginning of September, so I'm gonna ride the rest of the year out down here so I can get away from the cold winter and be close to the family. So everyone's doing well. And overall, in general, it's like life's good right now.
I feel you, man. I've also had a quarantine with the family. I literally like took over their basement and like had to renovate it, make it my own. It was like at one point it felt like a 1995 yard sale. I was like, where am I? I can't work here. Like it was just like paint colors that I just didn't decide on. And it's like weird just doing these Zoom calls. They're like, no, this is not my place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how it's been for me. It's like I've been in like my parents' guest bedroom, so it's always changing angles for different meetings, trying to catch the vibe.
Right. Everyone's just trying to get the best Zoom angle.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
That's definitely a thing. So before we start, I mean, just for the audience, do you want to just kind of introduce like what you do, where you work at, just for context, and then we'll go into more so your backstory and like, your background.
Yeah, currently I am the head of artist marketing at UnitedMasters. So been in the business for like 12 years now, in a lot of different areas, from artist management to marketing to tour road manager to DJ. And somehow I landed at marketing, and I guess I do a decent job at it. But I currently lead the marketing department at UnitedMasters. So I get a chance to touch a lot of different areas, everything from specific artist projects for some of our priority artists, then for the larger platform, creating tools for artists that's in the platform that they can be able to use and be able to essentially operationalize their independence. And then the cool part is that I get to collaborate with a lot of the brand deals. So a lot of the ideation from campaign rollout to app install campaigns and running campaigns to excite artists about the platform. I get to kind of oversee all those different elements, and then the social for UnitedMasters. So we curate and edit and create a story, or try to tell a story through the social.
I love that. Yeah, we'll dive into that because I know you guys are doing some interesting things, really out of the box things with like the NBA. You guys put together like a little summit, this virtual event on the education side that went really well. I know a lot of people tuned in, including myself. But we'll dive into that. But a lot of folks see you as head of artist marketing now, but I think more so for me and for the audience, like I'm more so curious about like, how you got there, because a lot of folks see us in these positions, like what we do and what we're doing now, but they don't understand like what we did to get here.
Right.
they only see the shiny stuff, the final product, but no one understands the process and the journey. So what, you're back home in Southern Florida. You're in Miami, right?
Well, Southwest Florida, yeah. So it's
Southwest Florida,
just south of Tampa.
Nice. So you're on the west Southwest Florida, but what was that upbringing like for you? Just growing up, like who's those early influences in music? When it came to like, that first artist or first project that you kind of came across, you're like, like this is making me feel a certain way, or like I'm gonna just keep listening to this project or song.
Yeah. For me, like my parents are Caribbean, so growing up, my dad was playing, Bob Marley and the Wailers and Beres Hammond. So I always had like this kind of like world approach to my taste, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on one day I'd be listening to Caribbean music. Then later on in the day I'd be listening to maybe Kenny G.
Wow, Kenny G.
Or my dad was a big fan of like Tony Braxton, Mariah Carey during that time as well. So I got like this kind of like well-rounded genre bending kind of like appeal to music, and it was really
Right.
about the melodies. But I think that as far as hip hop, I think the first project that I really started to gravitate towards was I think it was probably between Jay and Nas. I remember going to get the Hard Knock Life album. I think maybe I
Mm-hmm.
was like I think I might have been like a sixth or seventh grade. And around that time, like I had a terrible report card. So
Uh,
uh, I was hiding my rap CDs because at that time, like rap wasn't all the way accepted by parents, especially coming from a Caribbean background. So I would
right.
hide my rap CDs that I would get from like BMG Club, where I would get like 12 CDs for the price of one. And I think I had a bad report card, and my mom found my CDs, and she kind of like cracked all my
Oh
like CDs
no.
because I hid my report card, and that just
No.
made me want. It was like one of those moments where it just made me want to like love rap music and hip hop even more. So at that point, it was like I was going through my rebellious phase where I was like, "Yo, I'm going to be in the music business one day," because at that time you were seeing Big and Puff on TV driving backwards and Hypnotized video. Um,
Yeah.
so it was a lot of those moments that, and then Pac, like it was a lot of those moments where like I remember it pushed me into wanting to be in the music business. So it's been like since I was 16, 15, 16, knowing that I was going to be in the business somehow or some way.
Yeah, that's crazy. I remember like that was like because you don't know this, but like I grew up in Central Florida for like 3 years, from 97 through like 99,
Right.
the end of 99. So this is like the beginning. I remember when Biggie and Pac died during that one year, and also just like where hip hop and R&B was, and just music was. It was like, they always call it the golden era, and
Yeah.
it was such a good time. As a young person, you're just like, well, like, and you're figuring things out. Well, so I was in junior high, so I remember those times very like vividly. But for you, like outside of the bigger artists, was there any artists that was like regional, or like through your friends, that were like, was
Oh,
anyone doing music, like
yeah.
anyone that stood out?
Yeah, of course. Like just being like growing up in Florida. I was actually born in New York, but growing up in Florida, like I was listening to artists like JT Money, Trick Daddy, Trina. Eventually, when I got to college, I was listening to Plies, but there was a lot of artists like from Fort Myers area where Plies is from, like Frank Linney. There was a lot of artists like on the west or the east coast, like Papa Duck. That like these were artists where I was in that kind of it was like it's not trap music, but it was like Florida thug. Like you
Yeah,
knew what that sounded like. You would hear the bass rattling
yeah,
on cars, like the dunks that would be driving by. Like that was what excited us during that kind of phase of like 17, 18 years old.
yeah. No, no, no. Definitely. I think it's important to understand also the regional influences too. Given that you're also listening to like the bigger guys like Jay and Biggie.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going through this rebellious stage. You're like, I'm gonna be in the music industry. Do you remember your first show, or like that first like music event that you went to? Was there like a concert that you went to like locally, that maybe like despite your parents' wishes you still went and you're just like, or you,
Man,
or maybe was this
yeah,
in college?
yeah. I think my first show was actually when I got to college, and um, I want to say it was like a local show in Tampa at Fuel where it had like Tampa had I was going to school at University of South Florida, and Tampa had
Okay.
this whole juke music kind of sound.
Yeah.
And I went to a concert where it probably was like Strizzo, Tampa Tony, some of the artists that was like it almost felt like they was about to blow. That's how big
Right.
the city was talking about those particular artists. So
Wow.
Fuel in Ybor City, I remember going to a Tampa Tony show, and like that was everybody was dancing and juking. You leave the club soaking wet, sweating, just from how packed it would be and just the energy
Yeah.
in there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's dope. And then talk about regionally, like what made Tampa music or like the music within that region just different from everything else that you were like listening to? Like, was it obviously the lingo, the production, like the 808s, like what gave it that like unique sound?
Yeah, it was definitely lingo. So like, everyone from Florida has like their own kind of lingo and
Yes,
slang. And it
very
was
aware.
yeah. So it was like I think that's what kind of was punching through a lot of times. Like
Hmm.
so if like for us, like hearing Trick Daddy on Jeezy's album when Jeezy came out
Hmm.
was crazy for us because for rap music, it just felt like it was Florida was very much like cut off from the rest of the music business.
Right.
And specifically Tampa had like this juke sound where it was like very sped up, where the BPMs were super like I want to say like 101 to 105. Like
Wow.
everything was to push you to the dance floor to dance. Because if you wasn't on the dance floor, the songs wasn't going to move in Central
Hmm.
Florida. And around that time, like Smiles and South Star was starting to kind of bubble
Yes.
in Central Florida.
Yeah.
So they had their own little style in Orlando, but
Hmm.
Tampa specifically had like this juke sound that where it was very much experimental, where it was like, like
Hmm.
uh, in Texas, you had that chopped and screw where you
Right.
knew like that was the sound of Houston. And
Right.
for Florida, we felt like Tampa was going to blow up from that, but it never really got a chance to, like to really punch out. Like artists now, like Rod Wave, is now
Yeah.
coming out creating new sounds from that same region.
Right.
But for the most part, it never got to really see the success or the potential what I think that it could have. But you
Yeah.
have like artists like Kaya on the flip side, like artists like Kaya who
Hmm.
had like a breakout single, and then you have artists like City Girls who might
Right.
use references from Kaya because they're from South Florida as well.
Gotcha. Gotcha. No, I mean, I think it's important to kind of note like who's paid it forward, even when it comes to like references and, especially where Florida music is now, especially Florida hip hop. You talk about Rod Wave, just like so many artists are from Florida.
Yeah,
Just over the past several years, like they really that really broke. It just goes to show like the amount of talent and music really evolved over the years. You know,
yeah, for sure.
so shout out to Florida music. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
so you're in college, University of Southern Florida. What was that experience like? You mentioned that you went to that first concert. Like, is this where you started to kind of dabble in the music business, or was it like still very early? Were there like people that influenced you, like other young, college students that like were just as passionate with you? Because usually, like friends, like your circles of folks that you hang around with,
Mhm.
those are like spheres of influence. They're like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this. Like it's like the same mindset. Like, was that in your case?
Yeah, for sure. Like so the first day of college when my mom dropped me off, she dropped me off on the curb like where my dorm room was, and my best friend to this day, Sean Ferrari Simmons, he's a radio personality in Atlanta. He was walking by and he's like, "Yo, do you need some help?" So naturally, he helped me to the room, and then we went to go get something to eat. He had a car on campus, and he started playing his music. So it was natural for me to uh, be inquisitive about his music, trying to learn more. yo, where did you record this? How did you record this? Did you have a studio? Did you go to a studio? So I was asking all those questions because I knew that's what I wanted to do. But in the Tampa music scene, I think like as a college freshman, going to the club, being intrigued by the club promotions, like the people who was making seeing the flyers, people on campus passing out the flyers, like I got intrigued by that whole kind of like experience, like from street team promotions to
Right.
the party promoters to the radio DJs to the club DJs. And ultimately, like the thing that's gotten me to where I'm at today is from that very early age, like really starting to make relationships, build relationships with people, and trying to find ways that I can add value. And that's kind of like how I've been able to touch different areas in the business, because I was just experimental. I didn't know where I was going to land. It was just like, yo, if I can help you carry your crates at that time, then I'll help you carry your crates in just so I can get into the club. I'm not 21, but shoot, let me get into the club by carrying your crates in. Or let me pass out these flyers so that way I can win a street team, and now I can look like I was a part of the mix, and I can use that to lead into more opportunities. So college definitely played a big role on like how I got to where I'm at, and just being experimental and meeting people and building relationships.
Yeah, that's super important when it comes to supporting your friends. And for those that are watching, carrying crates was real. Like I did that as well. Like people were in DJing on Serato. Serato is a DJ platform. Literally crates of vinyl that were like broken in different genres. And literally like they're just pulling these like, you know, vinyls out just like fast. Like there was up. I was just amazed by the DJs doing that, because like you literally had to like pack an entire car, just like, oh, this is reggae, this is hip hop, this is R&B, like everything was stacked, and you know the DJs would dig, and yeah, it was just like a really cool time to be part of, because I definitely was underage when just to get into these clubs. I mean, that's the only way I got in.
Right. Yeah. Same. And I remember there was one DJ in particular named DJ Eakin. He was on the radio station 95.7 The Beat, and he was DJing. Eventually, I started promoting parties, and he was DJing one of the parties I was promoting. And like for the first 4 weeks, like he was like, "Yo, just pay me my money," kind of thing. It was like we knew that we was gonna tag him to DJ our party because he was on the radio. But it was just very transactional. He just wanted to come in and DJ. He didn't want to kind of build a relationship with us. And then I think like one party we had, like it was like sold out at capacity, fire marshal coming. And that's when he started to kind of like really open up to us. And like I would be there like, yo, let me help you carry your stuff back to the car. Like at the end of the night, yeah, I paid you your money, but let's rap.
Right.
And he was like, yo, you know what? Come meet me at the station next week. And that was like the first person who opened the door that was like, yo, come in. I'm going to show you the game. I'm going to put you in some rooms. But once I put you in the rooms, you got to do the rest. And ultimately, like a lot of the opportunities I ended up having right after that was because of that DJ taking a chance and me not being afraid to go talk to him or help him with his crates and paying all his money instead of trying to give him shorts. Like, you know, sometimes that happens in the club business.
Doing good business. I mean, I want to point out a couple of things. One, you talked about promoting and marketing parties and events. I was definitely part of that scene as well. You know, especially like early in my career. Like, what was that like? Because like sometimes you how did you get into like promotions? Because that became like a thing. Like it was just like a lifestyle. You know, it's like you're the guy that's organized and has marketing ideas and like to put it together.
Yeah, and I think it was I think the unique thing about me and some of my friends like Ferrari and one of my good friends Cook, we was like very much in the college space. Like we was very much in the mix on campus. And I think at the time when we started throwing parties, it was probably our sophomore year. It was at the point where people were starting to know us. We started to have our own kind of like style and kind of flavor. So like what we would do is we just started with one party at this spot called Bull Ring. And it was like a sports bar. They just opened up. And it was just really just, I think our first party was called Thirsty Thursdays, and it was like the college night on
I love that.
Thursdays in
Yeah, yeah.
Tampa, and it was just putting flyers on cars, like
Mm-hmm.
going to other campus events, standing at the door, handing out flyers. Then,
Mm-hmm.
you know, at that time it wasn't really social media, so it was like you was going to different people, putting stuff on people's doors and telling people to put the flyers on their doors on the outside of their camp or their dorm rooms doors. So it was
Right.
things like that, like going to the food halls and passing out the flyers there, printing them out.
Yeah.
I think we used to get like 10 prints a day. So like you would go get all your friends to go to the print center. You'd be lined up like 10 people to get our 10 prints
Yeah.
per day.
I love that.
Four pictures on a flyer, you cut them down. So you
Yes.
have 4 flyers up on one sheet. And it was just being really scrappy, and, you know, you had to make something out of nothing. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. They're like, yo, how do you get in? It's like, really just start where you are and just start there.
Great
And
lesson.
figure out like, yo, how can I make something about what the things I have and who I know? And that particular lesson and that particular thing has helped me throughout my career, because in times when you go have your ups and downs, like you always have to kind of revert back to like, okay, well, what is it that I have? What can I do? How can I help? Kind of thing. And ultimately that's how we built out our promotions business. And we was known as the guys who were the college promoters in Tampa. So it gave us value. So eventually when I started working at the radio station, everyone knew me as the guy, as he knew everything for college. So built all the relationships from the labels who were sending their artists to town because they wanted to hit that college market. So that was really my way into the business, throwing parties, building a name on campus, and then working for the radio station as the college guy. And
Right.
now I was building all the relationships.
I think it's super important to note, like, because a lot of folks, they think you need a lot to start with, and, you know, just to start in music. And you essentially linked up with your friend. You built relationships throughout your college community, and you start throwing parties. And, you know, more often than not, you got to start something on your own first, and not get caught up in the idea of like working for a bigger company, just so you can get your boots on the ground and really kind of get your feet wet. You know, I like to say it's like you go through the growing pains of just kind of learning through experience, right? You know, trying to start your things on your own. As you're doing that, like, just want to go back to that experience. Like, were there any moments where like, okay, what were some of those like lessons learned for you? Because I'm sure in the beginning, there was pressure to like put these events together, get people out, you know, and do it on a high level on a consistent basis, you know, as your name started to like really get bigger.
Yeah. A couple things that I learned around that stage was how to have a hard conversation with your friends. Like, cause, you know, like when you're coming up, everybody wants to get into the club for free. Everybody wants to, they want to be down. So like everyone they start out wanting to help. But then that's when I really learned how to keep people accountable, where it was like, okay, well, we're going to do guest lists. So I need everybody to put names on this guest list. And then based off of how many people come to the club, that's how you get paid. Right. And that's going to dictate where your standing is for VIP bands for the following week. So it was like, even from the part of promotion, it was like, all right, cool. So if our party's on Thursday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night, we have to be out in the streets putting out flyers. So who's showing up late night? We had organized like areas on campus where flyers needed to be. So like we was really trying to keep people accountable during that time. And it really taught me how to have like the tough conversations with friends, like, yo, come on, teamwork makes the dream work. Like, I can't do this by myself. I know you want to be down, so let's help each other and get to the position where we want to be.
That's a tough conversation with your friends, especially at a young age, just because they see the, like I said, they see the product of it, like, oh, I get to be a party, there's people, I'm part of the crew. But like, guys, like, if we're gonna do this, we got to make money. Like, this is, and then I'm putting all the time and effort. Like, if we're gonna really do this, you gotta like hold your weight. And those are always tough conversations, especially when you're trying to develop a business. And it's dope that you were able to establish that early on.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was one of those things where no one wants to be on the side of the party that has no one in there. When
Been there.
when you're promoting the party, and you have DJ spinning to an empty dance floor, and you're sitting outside at the door, and like there's no running away from that. Like people
Mm-mm.
know, like when on the drive by, that the
Mm-hmm.
party's a flop because there's no cars in the parking lot. So
Right.
it was one of those things where like you go through all those situations, but then you have to have that conversation to keep your friends and the people
Mm-hmm.
who wants to be a part of your team accountable. And
Right.
that same lesson is like it's very much resonates today, like to where we are in our career now. It's like you got to
Right.
be able to hold each other accountable. Everyone on the team is important
Mm-hmm.
for their roles and their specialties. So,
Right.
I got an early age, like 20 years old, a chance to learn that early
Mm-hmm.
on, like running college.
Yeah, that's super important, especially now as you kind of scale your team and being able to delegate things, and because it's a team effort at the end of the day. Like no one person can be, the LeBron and just kind of carry the weight. Like everyone has to be able to add value for it to be
For sure.
successful. So fast forward, so the DJ gave you the opportunity. You got to work at the radio station, and this is where you mentioned that things really opened up for you. You became the guy for college marketing.
Yeah.
Um, so like people knew you for that. Like this is like, all right, this is my value proposition. This is what I'm offering these labels. What were those early years like, especially working at the station? And was there like a mentor or someone that helped? Because like I feel like there's levels to it. Like there was that DJ that gave you the opportunity. Was there someone else that like while you started working at the radio station to like open more doors for you, or was there like an experience that really helped you kind of just like, okay, this music thing is something that I really want to tap into?
Yeah, no, I think, I was doing the party promotions, but then one summer, I think it was my sophomore year summer, I went to, so the crazy thing about party promotions is that during the summertime, all the kids go home for the summer, so it's typically dead. So um, I did an internship in Atlanta for this company called Malden Brand Agency. And at the
Mm-hmm.
time, I didn't know what the company was. I just kind of applied on
Mm-hmm.
musicbizjobs.com. And it essentially was Jermaine Dupri's dad, Michael Malden, who had a company who was doing all the touring. Like he was one of the major touring companies at the time. Like he had a partnership with AAG, or Atlanta Worldwide Touring. So he was the guy who was putting on the concerts for like Lil Bow Wow and Omarion, the Scream Tour. So I spent the summer in Atlanta, interning there. So I got a chance to kind of really learn like the touring business, but then the tour marketing part of the business. And when that internship ended, I went back to Tampa, just really inspired, like, yo, it's time for me to like really step up, because I had a taste of like what the real music business is like during this internship. And I think Eakin, the same DJ who kind of opened that door for me to get into the radio station, he saw that I was serious about wanting to be in the business. And I was like, yo, I want to be a college rep. I had been talking to one of the people at So Def, so I was kind of like a college rep, but they wasn't really giving me any work to do, or like any product. So he was like, yo, talk to my guy Nales Goodwin at Atlantic. So he puts me on email with him. And I think it was Niles who basically connected me with Frank Johnson, who was like the head of promotion at the time. And I was on the college rep team. So now I had a chance
Oh,
to kind of like see like firsthand what the labels are doing and how they're promoting the artists. So at that point, like now I'm having all these boxes of promo material being sent to my dorm room. People are looking at me crazy, like, yo,
yeah.
why do you have like 5 boxes out your door? But that was the opportunity for me to be able to, like, it fast tracked everything. It was like, now I was really in the mix, because now when artists were coming to town, like Lupe Fiasco or
Right.
Flo Rida or Day 26,
Day 26.
Plies, like they was coming to me as the guy who was going to organize the whole meet and greet.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then the club promotions part of me was like, all right, cool. Get on my friends who was helping me promote the parties. They're passing out the putting up the posters on campus, right? And we looked at
Mm-hmm.
it as like, this is a way that we're going to be able to build our company. Because I didn't look at
Mm-hmm.
it as just like, oh, this is Dave doing this stuff for Atlantic Records, I made it feel like this is my team. And at the time, we had this company called Urban Eyes. So like it was Urban Eyes who was pushing out all this content and pushing out all these events. So like it flowed. If we had a meet and greet with Day 26 on campus for Atlantic, it would then flow into Thirsty Thursdays at the Bull Ring with Urban Eyes and Day 26. So, you know, it was just like one of those things where it was like I really was able to have big vision early on, where it was like I knew that I wanted to be successful in the business, so I was gonna do whatever and exhaust everything I could possibly do to be able to get there.
No, I think it's key to have that foresight where, you know, you looked at everything from a big picture point of view. You know, you could have easily just been like, all right, I'm just going to focus on my career. But you decided to like really think about it where like you can integrate the thing that was working for you with your team, with, as you said, urbanize, right?
Yeah.
And integrate that with, you know, Atlantic, and just came together where like you really made it about the team. And that's super important when it comes to leadership, like to be able to have people buy into the bigger vision versus like, oh, okay, cool. Like David, he's like, he got this gig. Like, what am I doing now? Like, no, you're part of this. Like, we're going to do this together. So that's super important. So do you remember, you know, what that first artist experience was like? And do you remember like managing that artist experience? Like, cause I know it could be hectic given that, you know, artists are special people. You know, I love artists, but like when it comes down to like activations, it's like, you're just like another guy sometimes, you know, doing a marketing thing. But, you know, but then there's artists that love people in general. So, you know, what was that first experience like?
I think the first experience I had with like actually dealing with the artist was Webby. Like Webby was coming and I organized this big meet and greet, and you know, like you put all this work into the meet and greet, you're expecting for the artist to come and be super happy that you like to see the fans, right? So, but that was the first experience where I saw like, oh, sometimes like artists aren't the most friendly people in the world, or they might not be super engaged, or that they've been doing this all day. So like this is the third city, or this is the third stop. And like, yo, they just want to be in and out. So that was the first experience where I felt like, yo, like, did I do something wrong? Or like, but it showed me that artists are unique people, right? But then I got to see that like the music grind from an artist perspective is real. Like when you start seeing like, yo, they drove 8 hours today total across the state of Florida to come, and the last stop is your meet and greet. It's like, yo, they're just trying to like check the box and be out. Like, and I think that was one of the first experiences with an artist where I realized from both sides, like, yo, like they could be really short with you, or you have to understand what they're going through as well. So like you have to kind of see both sides and take a step back. It's not about you. Take a step back and just get ready to do it again the next time.
Yeah, no, I've always learned that working with artists, not to take it personal, like because you have to manage moods, I like to say. So it's like you manage the
personalities. You managing personalities essentially.
Yeah, no, 100% is for the managers, A&Rs out there watching this. I'm sure you know. So what was that special experience with an artist that really was like great to work with? Like you're like, okay, cool. Like this was what it was with Webby, but with this artist, it was like, wow, like this is why I love music.
I think it was honestly, I think it was Day 26, like was the first real big kind of experience, because they was fresh off of the television show with Diddy, and they pulled up on campus with a tour bus, and we did a meet and greet like right out in front of the student union. So it was like, it was a massive crowd that was going crazy, and they was doing everything. They was taking pictures with it, with anyone who wanted to take a picture. Like they was like, it was multiple guys. So like they was looking at it as like, yo, this is dope. Right. And they was so appreciative where they was thanking us. And, you know, at that moment I felt like, yo, actually we did a good job. And like it excited us to want to do more, for go above and beyond for the artists and recreate that kind of experience that we had with that artist. So that was one. It was always fun to do stuff with Plies. But I think the first artist that was like, it felt like he was a friend was like Bobby V. Like Bobby V and his manager, Courtney, they came to town. I picked them up from the airport in the radio station truck. And they was just cool. Like they was like, yo, they was asking me questions about like, yo, so what do you want to do? Are you like, how do you want to, where you see yourself? And like they was asking me the questions that was keeping me engaged. And essentially like that was the relationship that kind of like said, you know what, you should take what you're doing in Tampa to a bigger city like Atlanta and dive deep into this, because like now I had people in the industry who was investing in me and like, yo, I'll connect you when you come to Atlanta, I'll connect you with whoever, right? And that was one of those experiences where I could say it was a positive experience in general, because it resonates to this day to me. Is like I can point my finger to that moment where it was like, yo, all right, cool. I kind of like this thing.
Yeah, definitely. And people don't realize, like, you know, especially if you're on the management side, business side, when an artist invests in you, like you just go 100 times harder, like for that artist. And because it's a relationship at the end of the day. Obviously, we want the best for the artist, but like when the artist is really like has interest in you as a person as well, it's like it goes a long way. So artists, treat your managers, marketing people with love. They're gonna you know, definitely do their best to do the best for you. So fast forward, you're crushing it on the college marketing side. You're building your reputation with Urban Eyes and the radio station, and you have these Atlantic record artists coming through. Fast forward to, you mentioned Atlanta. Is that where like the next steps, like kind of like the next chapter is for you?
Yeah. So yeah, for sure. So me and my best friend Ferrari, at the time he was going by Sean Simmons. He was rapping. I was kind of managing him. We decided that we was going to move to Atlanta. At that point, it was like we was really thriving, but we had just graduated school and it was a recession. So I couldn't find a job. Like Ferrari was working at an apartment complex. I couldn't find a job because it was like 2007, I believe. And it was just rough. Like in Tampa, it was like, I'm just gonna have to dive into this promotions thing full force. And Ferrari was like, yo, I got a job offer in Atlanta. I get half off rent at this complex I work at. So like, yo, we might as well just get a 2-bedroom and thug out. And that's what we did. We moved to Atlanta. I think I might have had like $750 in my account from the residue of promoting. And we moved to Atlanta. I started tapping into a lot of those relationships I built when I was at the radio station. So a couple in general, like Courtney Stewart, who manages Khalid now, Ray Daniels, who's at Warner Music, and Biddy Barnes, who was like the first person in Atlanta to like say like, yo, why don't you come work with us? And he was managing this artist named Verse Simmons, who was signed to Interscope at the time. And he's like, yo, we're going on the road this weekend. Verse had this song called Buy You Around. And he's like, yo, just come on the road with us, drive. And that turned into me going out on the road every weekend with Verse and Biddy, driving through the Southeast to different tourist spots or shows that he was doing. And then just using the same kind of like mentality that I always had, was like add value, get in the door, add value. And so I started as driving, then started to be like the road manager, then realizing like, yo, we can save money by not having a DJ. So that Dave DJ. So I started DJing, and eventually 3 years into the time out of the 6 years I was working with Verse, I became his manager, his co-manager. So me and Biddy, he saw that I kind of like did my time and really leveled up, and he gave me half percentage of his management percentage. And you know, I ended up working with Verse for 6 years, where he had tons of success on the artist side. but even more success on the writer and producer side, where he was working on projects with Jay-Z, Kanye, Chris Brown. He wrote like 6 songs at the time for Chris. And his pen was starting to get noticed around the industry. So that was like the transition from, yo, you've been promoting artists to rolling out projects for artists to DJing for artists. Now you're going to learn how to pitch and get records placed and learn the publishing side of the business. Make sure that all the paperwork and the splits are done right. And, you know, that's kind of like what accelerated my career, the writing part of the business, because now I was actually meeting more people in the business, where it was like meeting publishers, meeting other producers and writers that was bubbling, going to the labels and pitching records and songs and meeting A&Rs. And that was what fast tracked like kind of like my experience level in the business.
No, I love that. And just for the folks that are listening, you said, I think that's super important. Like, how do I add value? How do I add value? Because, you know, I think, you know, a lot of young folks are, especially the, you know, folks who are watching this, are very eager to like get these high positions, but like, you got to like really earn your way in there. And you started, you know, with just driving, right?
Yep.
And then eventually transpired into you DJing the events and then co-managing. And I think there's levels to it, because you can't skip steps. Because once you do, it's hard to like go back and learn those things again. And, you know, that's why it takes years to like get to a position where like you're confident enough to like, now you're transitioning into this publishing space where like you can speak on the artist, you can speak on the writer, and have conversations where you're pitching, you know, his records for other artists and other publishers and other labels. And there's levels to it, you know. You know. Yep. So I just wanted to point that out, because it's easy to get caught up in your position, like, well, you know, I want to like make it already, or, you know, folks need to really like take their time and invest in learning these skills, and then eventually like catching their stride and like hitting that moment. All right, cool. Doing this for 4 or 5 years, 6 years, I have the confidence to like actually take this to another level.
It was one of those things where it's like, you can't skip steps. I read this book called Smart Cuts, where it basically talks about like, you can't skip the steps, you can't take shortcuts, but you can make smart cuts. And the smart cut was me doing whatever I could, learning, being a sponge, putting myself in position to add value, and being in the right place at the right time. In a lot of those cases, like, there was a lot of long nights where like literally, I remember there was a point where we had one car, me, Verse, and my other best friend, Sham. He's a producer. We would literally ride to the studio every day in that same Acura Legend. And then we would go pick up Verse's mom from work, drop her home, and I would come back to the studio, and Verse and Sham would still be cooking. And during that time where we would be like, yo, these are like scary hours, because we would go to the studio at 3:00 and then be in there until like 6 a.m., just enough time to go pick up his mom to take her to work, and then sleep for a couple hours, and then go back to the studio. And that's when the Who Gon' Stop Me record on Jay-Z and Kanye album happened. It was like during that time where we was like relentlessly chasing, trying to figure it out.
No, that's super important to note. In this, I just want to just note too, like, I think Atlanta music culture is so unique. I just want to just like pivot real quick. Talk about just Atlanta culture, because I love everyone from Atlanta that I've had a chance to work with. You know, what makes Atlanta culture about community, about, you know, having your brother or sister, like, just have them win and root for them, and have that kind of like go back to you and be reciprocated. Because I feel like just certain regions are just very just like, I'm going to do me and you do you. But Atlanta is different.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess it started even before we came up, you know, when you think about like everything from like Chris Hicks and Noonie from Noontime, and like a lot of the companies like JD and Tip and Hustle Gang, Grand Hustle, like, it's the community that they built. And essentially, like, we was coming in DTP, like all of us were coming in wanting to do what they was doing, right? And everybody at that time was supporting each other. Very much so, like the nightlife in Atlanta is a big staple. So it's like there's no way around it. You're going to kind of connect in some way. And a lot of the people who I met were in the nightlife in Atlanta. So like I remember some of my good friends were maybe interning at DTP or working at Grand Hustle or working the door at Alex Gidewan's clubs. And like we would see each other like fresh out of college grinding, and then you would build relationships with those people who are on your same level. I think a lot of times people will go try to go towards the person who's already made it, right? But I think what made Atlanta so special is that people actually grow up together as like their different classes in high school or in college, right? So as certain people start having opportunities, everyone's lifting each other up and opening the door for someone else that's in their network. And I think that's one of the most beautiful parts of this. It's like people who I started out early on in 2009 when we moved to Atlanta are now thriving, and we're all elevating, and we can actually help each other in our roles. And now it's to the point where we're lifting up other people who we see as like, yo, they're the next wave of talent and wave of artists, or maybe next level of executives. So it's very much community based. Like everybody's always going to different events and supporting each other. And I think that's one of the dopest parts about Atlanta. It's very, very much community based.
Yeah. It's a family. I didn't realize that when I didn't put two together when we went to that event and you pulled up, and then you started giving Pat, just for context, is a manager from Atlanta, and the whole team. I was like, how do you know these guys? Like, too, and I was working with an artist, Landstrip Chip, who's based from Atlanta, and I was wondering like your connection with them. I was like, oh, this all makes sense now. Going back to it.
No, I mean it's crazy because like, yeah, I connected with Pat on Landstrip Chip, but I knew Pat when he was a club promoter. So I'd be going to the clubs trying to get Versus records played, and Pat was the guy who was letting me in the club. He was working the door. So that's exactly what I'm referring to. It's like you see people from 2010 where you meet them outside of Sweet Lounge, and you guys are building, you guys see each other grinding, and you're always connecting. And you know, I think there's tons of stories, and it's still happening in Atlanta like that, where you know, you find your entry point, but then you find ways to build a real genuine relationship with people.
Yeah, I just wanted to point that out, how that kind of comes full circle, especially later in your career, when everyone starts to really level up. So I want to fast forward. So you're working with Verse, right? You know, with the management side. Fast forward to like, you know, the marketing positions that you start to take up. You know, we met obviously at Rock Nation. When you were at Rock Nation, I was at Def Jam. And then what was that experience like working at Rock? And then also most recently, you know, your position as a head of artist marketing at UM.
Yeah. Well, I'll kind of take you to how it happened. Towards the end of the time when I was working with Verse, the music business was changing, right? It was like Spotify was really starting to poke its head out a little bit, but Apple Music was a thing. People were moving away from iTunes, and Spotify had just launched their Spotify for Artists tool, right? And I think that was the point where I started getting intrigued with the analytics and the data side of the business, like, and realized like, okay, well, cool. If I can't get on this major playlist, how can I get streams for my artists, right?
Right.
Understanding who the audience is. How do I build a community around this artist? So I was taking a lot of like from a managerial or like a manager perspective, but then also seeing like, okay, well, the music business is changing, and if I don't go to school again, essentially, like I'm gonna get left behind. And during that time when the business was changing, I started diving into digital, and I felt burnt out from being an artist manager because like I felt like, like once you start having some success and then you stop working with that artist anymore, people start to turn your back on you. And I felt like I didn't understand that piece of the business where I was like, yo, I thought these were actually friends that I was making in the business. Like, 'cause I looked at it that way. So
Right.
I got burnt out from the music business. I was like, yo, I'm done with this kind of
Right
thing.
now. Yeah. Yep.
So I started diving into the digital space. Like influencers was a big conversation, millennials was a big conversation. And I just really started studying that world where I was like, well, if this is what it takes to be an influencer, let me build relationships with a gang of influencers. Everyone's talking about millennials, so let me build relationships with all the millennials that are at different companies like Coca-Cola, Home Depot, all these different companies. So if I ever decide I want to go back into music again, that this is like a 6 month kind of period where it was like the last 3 months of me working with Verse, and then the 6 months of me like really sitting there like, yo, what are you going to do? Right. And that 6 months was so important because that's when I actually learned how to sell myself. And I was selling myself based off of the things that I had studied during that 6 months, right? Because for 6 years, I was selling someone else in order for me to make money. And now I had to sell myself to get myself in the door.
Right.
And that's when, like, it started off with one artist I would consult for digital, Kayla Brianna. And I would start diving into her data, release her song, then think about all the growth hacks. That's when I really started figuring out, oh, there's user-generated playlists on Spotify. So maybe I need to reach out to these guys. How do I reach out to them? Let me type in Gmail into the search filter on Spotify. Oh, snap, I found all these email addresses for playlisters. So now it was just kind of like reverse engineering what it was going to take to kind of build an artist's fan base. Like I knew where I wanted to take the artist, but now I had to reverse engineer how to get there. Using influencers, playlisting, tapping into different millennials, and just understanding like, how are millennials consuming music? Like what are the things that they care about?
Right.
So consulting Kayla Brianna led to the reports that I was sending her management and her father and her team, led to them saying, yo, you should talk to this person. And eventually I started bringing in more artists that's where I met King Carter. Well, I knew King Carter, but met Arnold Taylor because Arnold caught wind of one of my reports. So I started doing things for Black Zach and for DaBaby. And this is like 5 years ago.
Wow.
So it was during these moments where like I was really refining like my marketing chops and my digital chops. And I bumped into this attorney who had a YouTube monetization company and was trying to pitch him on an influencer platform. And he was like, yo, you're really smart. Why don't you come and work with the artists that I'm working with at the company that we're doing YouTube monetization for? And, I was like, you know what? I don't necessarily want to work for you because I have my consulting business, but I'll come in and help. Like, just give me 5% of anything that I bring to the table. And at that time, we started doing distribution. I started working more closely with them. And one of the first artists we brought to the table was Gunna. And then after Gunna was Young Nudie, another one of the guys who was working there brought Young Nudie to the table. Melhado, Young Bands. Then a lot of artists from Atlanta started gravitating to this company called Streamcut, which we started.
Streamcut.
Yeah, so I was like the third employee at Streamcut where we started growing the business there, and had over the course of 2 years had a lot of success with some of the artists we was building there, mainly Gunna and Young Bands. And from the success from Gunna, I realized that I knew how to build an artist from the ground up. I realized like, yo, this is the process to put artists in the right position. And these are the things that you might not see the growth right away, but you're building a story. And it was more about the story, the narrative, and measuring the small little signs that you was growing in the right direction. And I started hanging my hat on that. Like I can build an artist from the ground up. and people around the industry were starting to have conversations with me, and that's what led me to Rock Nation.
Gotcha. No, it's super important. I mean, there's a couple key things I wanted to note. One, your transition from being a manager into like really pivoting into like the new way of music consumption, right? Through Spotify, understanding Spotify for artists. And to your point earlier, and then, like I said, there's this side of the business where, especially on the management side, very fulfilling in a sense where like you learn a lot how to work with artists, but also there's the side where it's like it can be a thankless business, and because you're putting your sweat equity, everything into it. But I value my manager experience. I'm sure you do too, just because that experience is timely when dealing with artists. There's a language that you speak when you're talking to artists. And if you don't have that experience, it's hard to get things done for them, have them do things. So so I value that, and I'm glad that you were able to pivot into like what they call new media at the time, digital marketing and so forth. So I love the fact that you were talking about just understanding audiences, and for a lot of the marketers here, like, and even for the artists, we get so caught up in the marketing strategy that we're not listening to like what your audience wants or what they're talking about or why they like you.
Yep.
It's like, oh, we're just going to force feed them these things and expect them to consume it. But have you actually looked at the data? Have you looked at the cities that are like really reacting? Because there's opportunity for you to tour there. Like, and I value data so much, like as a marketer. And I think for the folks that are watching this, like, you just can't have just great ideas. You have to like really integrate the data and make it holistic, so you have a complete picture. It's like, okay, great idea, but do we know who we're talking to? Like, how do we know how we're marketing this, and does this even make sense for the audience that we're talking to? So I just wanted to note that. And when it came to your like acceleration in your career, I love the fact that you talked about Gunna and kind of building artists from scratch. And it's always those type of moments where like, when you're able to build an artist and really break that artist, where you can really see, from the beginning to end, like, okay, this is what I did. And to your point, reverse engineer the things that really worked, and hopefully like replicate those things and customize it to other artists, so that's super important.
One thing I would note is that every artist is different. So it's not like you can just take the template and just, it worked for this artist, I'm gonna take it over here and do it for this artist. But a lot of those things of like understanding the data, trying to build a narrative for the artists, and really just putting the artist in the right position or right places for the fans that are going to consume that artist, will have the opportunity to discover them. And I think that's the thing to note. It's like, one thing that works for Gunna might not work for young bands or Melhado. You have to kind of really approach each one of those artists separately.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Case by case. No, that's super important. No. So just to fast forward, so Rock Nation. So we met when I was at Def Jam and you were Rock Nation. And then I remember like it was like 3 weeks later, you went over to UnitedMasters. I was like, no, I liked working with him. Because we were working at the time, for context, we were working on Rhapsody. It was a really great project. I had a chance to be part of. So talk about like what you're doing now. What your experience has been like, and at UnitedMasters, and for the independent community of artists that are part of the Digilogue, some things that they may not know about that they can benefit from, obviously working on the platform.
Yeah, for sure. So I've always been entrepreneurial, not really by choice. It was always by like, you got to put some figure it out, right, and get in the door. So from the club promotions to artist management, to helping launch a startup distribution company, like that's the area where I saw that I thrived in. So when I was at Rock Nation, being in like the more corporate kind of like type company or a major label, I didn't necessarily feel like I thrived in that role. So when I saw that there was an opportunity to go to UnitedMasters, it just made sense for me and aligned with like where I felt like I needed to be in my career. But then also it gave me the opportunity to get into like that startup mentality and that real scrappy entrepreneurial space where on any given day I can be working on something different and my ideas could actually I can spend 3 months developing something like how I would develop an artist and not be scrutinized every day on it, right? And it was like I can go sit over there and try to figure it out and develop something that turns into something great. And I think that that's one of the most uh, one of the things that I love the most about working at UnitedMasters because it's very scrappy. It's very it aligns with the things that I believe in, the things that artists should have, like valuing ownership and being able to maintain 100% of their royalties or even a 90-10 split, but they can maintain the ownership of their masters. Like those are things that from a manager perspective, like really mattered to me from a manager. Like those are things that I would fight for my clients.
Right.
So it just naturally made sense for me to gravitate towards UnitedMasters.
Yeah, no, that's super important, especially given your entrepreneurial background. I mean, just for context, I mean, back in Southwest Florida, you grew up, really like a plethora of just all types of music, inspired by like, what you grew up, listening to, and then really understanding like your earlier experiences of collecting those like CDs, Jay-Z, and having your mom tear those apart, but like you being inspired to like break into the music industry from what you saw to your first day, meeting your partner, for Urbanize, and falling in love with the idea of like music and promotion of music within your college scene, and then having the opportunity with the DJ who got you that gig at the college radio station, where like now you're like the college marketing guy and people is like tapping in. And then there's that opportunity where like you went to Atlanta, you got that internship, and you took those relationships and you were able to get another opportunity through Atlantic to like start promoting in the college scene. And then through that, fast forward, you're like, all right, I'm gonna move to Atlanta with my boy. We're gonna thug it out. We're gonna like try to make things work. You find this songwriter, artist, verse. You start as essentially driving him to places. You start becoming his DJ, and then all of a sudden his co-manager. You do that for 6 years. You pivot into this technology role, this media role, this digital marketing role, where now you're like looking at the data, working for a startup company like Streamcuts, and working with artists like you mentioned, like Gunna, and breaking them, and then having the experience to like fortitude to do that, and be able to like take that experience and elevate that towards like Rock Nation. And then now all those experiences are like, I just want to sum that up, because all that has taken place because it's prepared you for these moments. And I want to summarize that, because this is the whole point: lessons learned. I mean, I wanted to show like your journey. It's not A to B, it's A through Z. Like you got to take all these stops, and it's really dope, to like have you kind of share those experiences and show like it's taken all this hard work and experiences like to get to what you do every day at UnitedMasters, man. And if through all that, what would you say would be your biggest lesson learned? If you could, like, because we always like to sum up our episodes with like one key takeaway. Obviously, there was a lot of gems throughout it, but what's one thing you want to kind of share with the Digilogue community?
Man, it's there's probably two that I would say that have like really been like my North Star. Like the journey is never like straight. You can't like chart your path all the way. I think
Facts.
along the way there's been a lot of ups and downs for me. Just when you Like even from the point where I felt like, I didn't want to be in the music business anymore. And then educating myself again, and just like not being afraid to be vulnerable in the space of like, I'm not the most knowledgeable in this space, but I'm going to learn. I'm going to dive into the data. I'm going to figure it out. And I'm going to use my scrappiness and just my ability to be able to just figure things out has helped me kind of punch through to the other side. And it's still the same thing. It's like, I remember a lot of times, like I was looking at how other people were moving faster in their career than I was. And, you almost feel away because it's like, I work hard too. Like, why am I not getting those opportunities? And it wasn't until I just like, was like, forget about that, focus on yourself, do good work, and just build. And don't go out there looking for opportunities, like job opportunities, go and create it. Like that's when I started to see the most traction in what I was doing. It was, and I think the other piece is build relationships that people always see you as someone who does a good job and does the right thing, right? And it's trustworthy because ultimately there's people who will talk great about me or name drop me in different rooms that's helped me have certain conversations to get me in different opportunities in my career. So, it's always do right by people and it's like what they say, like treat the janitor with the same respect as you treat the CEO.
Right.
And I think that's the kind of thing that I've kind of hung on my hat, where it's like, I'm always going to just kind of push forward, but then just treat people and do right by people.
Man, I mean, there's so many key points right there. I think, and it's about practicing them. I think for one, everyone has their own, roadmap, right? I've been there before, like comparing myself to other people in times where like, I was like, why am I not excelling? And I know I work hard too. And and you just got to know you're going to find your moment, your inflection point, that tipping point where it's like, all right, things are really going fast, but for some people it just takes a little bit longer, and that's okay. And I think also to your point, like having relationships where like, those early relationships in Atlanta and how that kind of like circled back to you, what you're doing now. And I think for a lot of folks that are building their name, especially now, and if I'm on a position where like, it doesn't matter, like we can have titles, that doesn't really matter right now. It all depends on like how you treat people. That's what people remember you for. And hopefully for the community, respect and relationships go a long way. And I don't like, we try to drill that down all the time, but some people just don't practice it, and it's definitely come back to haunt them. But David, man, really appreciate you taking your time. I loved learning about your story. This was really dope, just because, I think for the community, they got a chance to see a different side of you, and also a side where I think a lot of people will get inspired by this episode. And it's definitely one of my favorite episodes so far. But appreciate you, man. We're gonna wrap up episode 19 of the L's. We're gonna make sure we have Dave's info in the description. Digilogue community, we're super grateful and thankful for your support, and can't wait for you guys to check out our new episodes coming out for top of the year. So stay tuned. Peace.